Okay, so thank you again, and thank you for coming to our FP2 training on the inspections module today. We're going to go over quite a number of training topics related to the inspection module, inspections, how they interact with properties, what property information tends to get imported, brought over from the property records, talking about inspection tab, scheduling inspections, lots of features of the inspection module themselves. So without further pause, let's go ahead and get going. So when we look at inspections in general in FirePro, inspections and property records are very tightly linked together. So when I work with property records, there's a fair bit of information on property records, which is quite relevant to the inspection process. So if I pull up a list of properties, I can look at an individual property file, and I'm going to see a bunch of information in there, which in many cases is relevant to the inspection process. So property name, for example, is a good example. We can see that on the property record, we can have lockbox information. This is more pre-planning, but there is also the ability to create a custom reminder on properties, which can be used in addition to the standard inspection scheduling, which is also available through the property record. In many cases, departments set this up to document things like annual fire drills, or if they're doing specialty drills or checks on vulnerable occupancies or high-risk occupancies. This allows you to have a secondary set of reminders attached to a property in addition to the standard inspection scheduling reminders, which we're going to talk about as well. If you want to go ahead and set up something like an annual fire drill reminder, you need to go to the setup menu under custom settings, and in the properties section under custom fields, there's this reminder section here. You can give that additional reminder a label and set both an inspection period and a notification period on it. So this is set to be a once-a-year inspection that also gets a 60-day notification period. Those inspection reminders flow into the reminders module. So they appear under, in this case, we can see we've named it annual fire drill. So that would show up as an annual fire drill reminder on the reminders module. It can also be emailed out as part of the automated process as well. So that is a properties feature which can be used to support inspections that's available. There is also going to be a fair bit of information in the context section of properties, which is going to flow into inspections. So when you create an inspection in FirePro, it assumes that you're going to want this contact information from the property record. So we can see here that there's a couple of different occupants. I can probably get rid of that one, but I can have particular additional occupants in here in the contacts with business names potentially. We can flag these contacts as primary owner or primary occupant. This is helpful further down the line when we start to look at inspection reports, because we're often going to be on an inspection report wanting to identify who's the owner, who's the occupant of this. And these tick boxes on the contact records are where that information is drawn from. So we can have multiple different contacts. They can have their own phone numbers and email addresses. So this information, when you create an inspection, is going to get copied over. It's really important to remember in this context, though, is that this information will be copied. So the inspections hold a copy of what the contacts were at the time of the inspection, not a current contact set. That means you can always update the contacts on the property record without worrying about how it will affect your historical inspection records. What this also means is that if you do have updated ownership information or new contacts that you want to have involved in an inspection, it can be a good idea to update them directly on the property first, which is going to allow you to bring those over automatically into the inspections and not have to manually enter them again. So keeping the contact information on the property up to date can be a big time saver and make the inspection process quite a bit easier. Now, when we look at the inspections tab of a property record, it's going to have a bunch of information related to the inspection process on here. And sometimes this might look a little different depending on exactly what types of inspection reports you're using in FirePro. If we look at the building code class and subclass, if you are, say, for example, in the province of Ontario, or you're not using the custom checklist or the inspection checklist for FirePro, this building code class and subclass is primarily for just managing reports so that you can run reports on how many inspections you've done on different building code classifications. If you're using the checklist module for inspections, what you can also do is have custom checklists for different building code classifications and subclassifications. I'm going to go into this in more detail when I talk about how to actually build inspection checklists and that sort of thing. But the basic idea is that in the maintenance menu, under inspection checklists, you have the ability to build what's called checklists by category. And those allow you to create specific checklists that are tied to different building code classes, which will mean that the process of building your checklist is automated as long as you pick one of those building code classes. If you need a hand setting that up, we can do that through technical support. Just be aware that this is an option. You can also customize the checklist for each property using the Setup Checklist button. But more importantly, from an inspection management perspective, we have the ability on the properties to set what's called a periodic inspection and an inspection frequency. So this is going to allow you to say, when did we last do an inspection here, and how frequently are inspections supposed to happen? You can also attach a default inspector to a particular property if you want to do that. Or in some cases, you might want to attach a default squad or platoon to that property. Those are all possible to do through this inspection with some configuration set up on FirePro. In addition, there's a number of custom checkboxes here, which you can use to put in more information about what sort of facilities might be on site that you might want to pay attention to. So these are hidden right now, but if you wanted to add stuff like that, you could go to the setup menu, again, under custom settings. And when I go to the properties section under custom fields, I have a number of what we call inspection checkbox. So you could do something like, is this property sprinklered? So once you put in that label, that option becomes available for you on the inspections tab of the property. And the search function becomes available for you as well. So in the properties list window under the inspection section, I can now say, show me all my sprinklered properties, for example. So there's a number of custom checkboxes there which can be used to organize your inspectable properties in a little more detail. Those are all in there available to you now. So a bunch of custom checkboxes. We can add default inspector. When I put in information related to periodic inspection, I can put in my last inspection date and my inspection frequency, and this is going to generate for me what we call an inspection due date. So this is saying this is when the regularly scheduled inspections for this property are due. We can see that information on the property list by making sure that our inspection due date and last inspection dates are visible. There's a standard template in FirePro called Inspection, which includes those fields. So that allows you to see those pretty easily. And if you look on the Inspections tab of the property list, you can search for properties based on their inspection due date. So I could say, show me every property that has an inspection due on it this year, and I'm going to see a bunch of information related to different properties that have inspections due on them. The inspection due date, which is again populated out of this Inspections tab, this also generates a reminder for you in the Reminders module. So if I go into the Reminders module, I can actually search specifically for what we call periodic inspections. So that means the regularly scheduled inspections. This is not looking for inspection reports specifically, it's looking for properties that have inspections due on them. So again, I can see a bunch of properties that have inspections due. If I want to go directly to the property record, I can double click on that. This does also allow me to filter by assigned inspector. If you are organizing your properties in your fire protection area or in your inspectable area based on who's responsible for them, you could say this particular property is assigned to this person, and then you can add that to your search. Say, show me anything that's due for this person. You know, I want to see what's due for me specifically. So this gives you the ability to really organize your properties and flag them in specifically for setting things up for your various different inspections. I'm just gonna grab a note here. Okay, so the property records contain a lot of information related to scheduling your inspections, organizing your properties. It is also possible to take your properties in FirePro and link them together into larger units for when you're trying to manage a more complicated property. So for example, if we were dealing with a hotel complex that had a hotel, a restaurant, and a cold beer and wine store in it, you might want to have separate inspection histories and separate details for all those properties, even though they're part of a single unit. And what we have in FirePro is what we call the property type option. So we can say that this particular property, if, for example, if we look at a different address, we can say, okay, this particular property file represents the main property, be it the entire complex or the entire plaza. I can set that then as a primary property record, primary property type. And then I can attach as many secondary properties as I want to that primary. And those secondaries can represent the individual businesses that are in that property or individual units in a more complicated property. So I can say, all right, you know, this is at 50th Avenue. I'm going to duplicate this property record, make an exact copy, but I'm going to say this is the, I don't want to screenshot, this is the A and W. What's there? And this is a secondary property. It's Suite 101 on here. And I'm just going to attach it to the primary. So what that means when I look at things now is that when I look at the primary property record, I can see in here that it's flagged as primary and there's a secondaries button. If I hit secondaries, it'll show me a list of all the secondary properties that are on here. And each one of these secondary properties can have its own occupancy and property class. It can have its own contacts. It can have its own inspection history and building code classification, its own scheduled periodic inspection dates. Lets you keep all that information as a separate file. The neat thing about it is that any inspections that you might add to this secondary property will automatically show up on the primary, and you can always look at the primary. So the primary is going to have inspections that will show up in green on here, which indicate that they are inspections that are attached to the secondary. It makes the primary record, property record, kind of a master file, which shows you everything that has happened on all the secondaries, and allows you to generate a more complicated and detailed file for a more complicated piece of property. So that lets you also break things down in a little more detail. Now, when I look at this actual inspections tab, I'm going to see in the inspections section at the bottom a list of all the inspections that have happened on this property. I can also see an alarm tests tab. This is if you're using the FirePro alarm test module. If you're doing alarm tests, you can attach them into the property. And I can see a description tab. The description tab is primarily used for the province of Ontario, which has what we call inspection orders. Inspection orders are designed to include a written description of the property. If you put your written property description in this description tab, it will automatically appear on any inspection order that you create. That isn't mandatory, it's just a time saver for you if you're potentially issuing a lot of orders on a specific property. There is also a field on the right with just general notes about inspections. This is mostly used to allow you to put some internal notes in here about things that an inspector might want to be aware of in the context of inspecting this property. Like you have to call the property manager 2 weeks in advance or something like that. So you can put general notes in there. Now, when I am ready, based on my scheduling, to do an inspection, the simplest way to do that is just use the green plus button in the inspections tab of the property to create a new inspection file. I can also go directly to the inspections module and use the green plus button here to create a new inspection. If I select add inspection through this green plus button, it will again ask me to find a specific address that I'm going to attach the inspection to. So that's going to bring up my inspection on this particular property. So either way you do it will bring you into this master inspection file. So the master inspection file is designed to hold overall information about the current inspection that is ongoing. You can think of it like a digital file folder where all the information that you might write on the outside of the file folder for searching purposes is available. So we have the date that we started the inspection, we have the reference number for the inspection, and this reference number is also used to generate reference numbers for specific inspection reports as well. We have the reason that we started the inspection. Again, important to remember, the reason list is editable. So if you want to have more reasons, you can just add them right in here. And then we have the current status of the inspection. So this is usually used to indicate what phase of the inspection is this file in right now. That way you're able to look at a list of your current ongoing inspections and say, okay, this one is in a follow-up phase where I'm waiting, for them to respond, or this one is closed, for example. Again, we have a generic set of statuses, but you can modify those if you want. When I assign a status using the status drop-down list, the system will automatically put a date in here, which is the effective date of that status change. So we're saying, as of October 12th, 2023, this inspection was in progress, for example. Broadly speaking, the way we intend these statuses to work is that assigned means this inspection is your responsibility, but no action has been taken on it. In progress generally meant to mean we're working on it. Follow-up, again, we normally intend to mean we're waiting for some sort of follow-up. We've assigned responsibilities or requirements to the owner, but we will be following up, and then legal action and rescinded should be pretty straightforward. Closed is a bit special in the sense that when you close an inspection file, that automates a bunch of things in FirePro. We're going to look at the closing of an inspection process, but closing an inspection generally means it's going to roll the scheduling forward, and it's going to lock the inspection so that the inspection is not editable by anybody except people with very specific permissions in the system. We normally think of an inspection that has been closed as, this is a set of legal documents potentially. We don't want any changes to be made for it. If you are working on a closed inspection, if you have the right permissions, you can click on an edit button up at the top here and make changes to it, but it's normally going to give you notifications that, hey, this is closed already. So normally you only want to close an inspection at the very end of the entire process. when you're pretty much wrapped up in it. We do also have the ability to have an assigned inspector. This could also be an assigned platoon if that's the way you're doing it. But if I assign an inspector, this means that this inspection is kind of on their plate from a reports and reminders perspective. It also means that for some permission settings, only this user can make any changes to that inspection. So that's gonna kind of affect that process. When I created this inspection, the software also, and let's actually find one that has owners on it so that I can do that in a little bit more of an obvious way. When I create a brand new inspection on a property, the software is automatically going to copy the contacts over from the property record. Right? Those will come over by default. If for some reason you wanted to have different contacts on this inspection, you could certainly do that just by creating new contacts on here. Likewise, if you realize after you created the inspection that you have more contacts and you want to update them on the property record, if you add them to the property record, you can actually just come to this green plus button and it will show you a list on here of any contact that is on the primary property, so you can copy it over to the inspection immediately. So it does let you pull those contacts over relatively quickly, even if they weren't necessarily there when you initially created the inspection. There's a number of important things about contacts when it comes to inspections as well. So the first one is going to be related to primary owner or primary occupant. If you're generating any kind of inspection order in FirePro, you need to have at least one primary owner or primary occupant, one or the other. And only one contact can be flagged as primary owner, one as primary occupant. In a general inspection context, if you want a contact to be able to get a copy of an inspection, you need to tick off that they're a recipient. So that indicates that this contact can potentially receive the inspection, a copy of this inspection. This is generally going to be, if you're dealing with multiple owners, if you're dealing with an owner and an occupant, you want to flag that those are potential recipients of these inspections. Again, you can add as many contacts as you want, but if there's any context where someone needs to get a printed copy of an inspection, they need to be in this contact set so that you can essentially generate an inspection for them. The other kinds of information on here, invoices, deals more with departments that use the invoicing module and are invoicing out of it. You can add pictures, other types of files and letters. I am going to show you other ways to add pictures as well. But if you have like a bulk pictures section, you can add them to the overall links for the particular inspection. But if you want to just get started on doing an inspection, the basic information that you need to make sure is filled out is your reason and status, who the inspection is assigned to, and have at least one contact in there. Now that we have a basic inspection built and saved, this inspection will start to show up in the inspections module for you. So if I close things off here and I go back to the inspections module, I am going to see that we have these inspections that are now visible. So see, we have this inspection right here that we just created for the property in question. It's going to show us exactly when we started it, what the current status of the inspection is, why did we start this particular inspection process. It also gives us information about the number of inspection reports that we've issued on this inspection and the number of specific site visits that we've done. I'm going to show you how to do both inspection reports and site visits, but this is information that the system will show. On this list window, there are also a number of other columns that you might want to use. So if I right-click on the column header, I can see I get a bunch of other information related to inspections that I might find helpful. One of the ones that is potentially quite useful is what's called reinspection date. I'm going to show you how to use reinspection date, but I can add that column to this list. Again, I can drag the columns around. This is just standard list template stuff. And if I want to keep things that way, I just right-click on the window, save as my list template. And now in the future, I would see, for example, the inspection date on there. This inspections window also has some really helpful search functions in it, which are handy for keeping your inspection process organized once you have inspections started and on the go. So the best way to do this, I personally find, is if you're using this module or this window to manage your active inspections, there's some search parameters which are really helpful. So the first one is the date range search. I like to set the date range search for myself for a default search to all dates. The reason for this will become clear in a second, because you can also search for inspections that are assigned to a specific inspector. This would normally, if you're managing the inspection process, be yourself. And then there is a inspection status search function up in the upper right here. It defaults to any status, which means show me inspections of any type which are assigned to me. And we can see if we look down here that there's a ton that are closed. So what I normally like to do is change my status from any status to not closed, which is basically saying, show me any inspection which is still currently open for whatever reason. So what that's going to do is give me a search set which shows me all my various different types of inspections chronologically, but it shows, in this case, the ones that are not, in fact, closed inspections. This can be really handy because it means that once you close an inspection, it just drops off your automated search. So I will normally create a saved search, call it, Steve's Inspections. Save that search, and then for myself on my user profile, right-click on the window and say Set Default Search. That means that when you log into the inspections window, the system will automatically bring up any inspection that's assigned to you that isn't closed. It can be a very handy way to give yourself a current list of your active and ongoing inspections. This, for me, tends to be the most effective way to keep the stuff that I have in the ongoing pile right up in my face. What that does mean is that you should be, when an inspection is finished, toggling it to closed. Once I do that, the system is automatically going to ask me to prompt some stuff about the inspection scheduling, which we'll get to in a sec, but that will then take that inspection off my list and keep me current with my other inspections. Another thing that you're able to do on this window is, rather than just searching for basic inspection information, you can look for specific inspection events. So if I switch to the Events tab, I can say, show me this year, and this is not going to show me individual inspections, but is instead going to show me individual reports and activities that have been created on each inspection file. So I can see that I've done compliance reports and site visits and inspection checklists. And this can be a handy way of getting a clearer look at what is actually being done, in addition to just looking at the master inspection files, which are more designed to indicate big picture looks at what you're doing. So in that context, let's talk a bit about inspection events. So every inspection, once you create the basic inspection file, is designed just to be a log of different activities or things that have happened in the context of this inspection. The events are designed to be displayed chronologically, with the idea that it will just give you a history of all the things that happen. And broadly speaking, when we're dealing with inspections, there are three different kinds of events that you might see. So one type of event is an automatically created event. We might refer to it sometimes as a system event. For example, if I change the status or the assigned inspector on an inspection, the software will automatically keep track of that and generate a system event for me, which shows me that I changed the assigned inspector. It was toggled to a different person. Likewise, if I had moved this from follow-up to in progress, I can put an effective date in here. And once I save that, I'm going to get a status changed to in progress notification. So it's going to keep track of certain activities that I do more or less automatically for me when I print off inspections, when I issue them. Those sort of things are part of the system logging that the system just keeps track of for. The next type of event that you might be dealing with is one of the created events. So if I want to create a new event on an inspection, I just need to use this green plus button on the right-hand side, and it's going to give me a list of the various different types of events that I might want to create. And the specific type of events that are available are going to vary a little bit depending on how your FirePro system is configured, because we have a whole range of different inspection-based modules based on province and what the government in your particular area has decided is your job to fill out. But down at the bottom, there's a couple of events which are more of documentation events. They're used to document activities around the inspection process. So the first one is what we call a site visit. And site visits are normally intended to keep track of when you are physically boots on the ground doing a site visit for an inspection. So if I select a site visit, it brings me up a new site visit record. I have the date that I did the site visit. If I want to, I can put the start time for the site visit, and I can put duration. I can also configure this to be start and end time if you want to be a little more detailed that way, but I can put in how long this took. I can log which specific inspector did this, and I can put in some notes about the site visit. So this is just intended to be used to document when you were physically there. This is handy for a couple of reasons. The first is that it does allow you to keep track of time. It also allows you, if you ever have to reconstruct what happened, to have a detailed log of when you were actually there, what dates, who was there, that kind of information. So a site visit log is just going to keep track of, was I there? How long was I there for? What I can also do is there is an event called a custom event. So a custom event is intended to document any type of activity that happens around an inspection or in the context of an inspection that isn't actually rising to the level of I am issuing an actual form or report out of FirePro. So we can see that this department has set up a fair number where they document phone correspondences, times when they did smoke alarm checks, occupancy loads, plan reviews. There's potentially a lot of different stuff around the inspection process that you might be doing that isn't an actual inspection form. So it allows you to document this kind of stuff and be like, okay, in this case, we could say there was a phone correspondence. I can again select which inspector is doing this, and this doesn't have to be the assigned inspector. So for example, if someone calls in with a complaint, somebody else in the department takes the initial call, documents some information for the main inspector, you could put that, okay, Steve recorded this information, then I can put in detailed events notes. This was a phone call from a neighbor complaining about XYZ. So you can put detailed notes on here related to a phone correspondences, to emails. You can document lots of other kinds of activities that you might do. You can have as many different types of inspection events as you want in here. And each inspection event can also have the date that it happened, the time that you did it, and approximate timeframes, because again, this can flow into the overall duration tracking on an inspection where the inspection process is being monitored and it's keeping track of how much time you're spending on these things. So these type of events, the site visit and the custom event, are primarily used to just document things about the inspection. And then we have the important ones, the big boys. These are the actual reports that you might print and issue out of the FirePro software. So the most common one, which we see a lot, is what we would call a standard inspection report. In the province of Ontario or in Alberta, they also have an inspection order option where you can generate an inspection order, although Ontario has a range of different inspection orders, and we'll take a look at that. There's an inspection checklist form, which would be a customized checklist, and then we have a compliance report. So what I'm actually going to talk about first, it's a bit of a last first thing, but is the compliance report. So the compliance report is a simple form which is set up and intended to document some aspect of compliance. Most commonly, it's used in the context of you're in compliance and I want to give you some paperwork to document that. Compliance reports, because they are intended to be a sort of documentation of essentially completion or notification of lack of completion, are generally going to be attached to some other kind of event in the system. So if I select a compliance report here, what I see on the compliance report is I have a date, I have a report number. This is generated off of the primary report. I have an issue date for the compliance report, and I have what's called a linked to. So I can actually link a compliance report to any other kind of printed report in the software, or I can link it to a site visit. So if we were looking at this as an example, if I had gone out to this property, I had done an inspection, and there were no compliance violations that I found at all. What I could do, rather than generating a full inspection report that says no compliance violations, I can just go in and say, okay, I'm going to build a compliance report. I'm going to link it to the site visit that I did this day, and everything was satisfactory at that point. Now, I might want to have recipients on here for who I'm giving it to, and I could put additional notes in if I want, but the standard compliance report is going to allow me to print out a very simple report. Well, now I have to put in a recipient. One moment, please. We'll just put in, this is Bob Smith. Bob Smith is attached to so many different things in FP2 systems. And he's the primary owner, and we'll put him in as primary. And that's all I need to do. So what I can do there then is on my compliance report, I can say this one's sent to Bob Smith. I'm going to go ahead and save that and print it off. So this compliance report, very simple. In this case, I can have digital signature attached on here. If you want to get that set up, talk to us in terms of our customer tech support, and we can show you how to do that. It's going to show a satisfactory compliance with basic information about the primary report that it was attached to. These compliance reports can also be attached to more complicated inspections where you have the inspection information print on them. But in this case, it can be a quick way of putting in that things were satisfactory. If you want to generate this compliance report in a little more detail, you can go to the Setup menu in the option under Special Wording on Reports, and there's a Inspection Compliance Wording option. So what this lets you do is build standard terminology for satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or rescinded, which are the standard options that are available on a compliance report. So if I put in some wording for satisfactory, I can say like, it's all good, bro. That's the standard Office of Fire Marshal terminology they want you to use. No good. So you can put in standard terminology on here that will print on those reports automatically. So if I've put in some compliance wording and I flag this compliance report as satisfactory, I can go in, select print, and puts the standard text right on there for me. So the idea is to allow you to move relatively quickly in terms of generating a printed report, which indicates that things are in compliance, and hey, we've documented that. In this particular example, if I was happy with that whole situation, I've issued a compliance report, I did a site visit, I've issued a compliance report, I could then go ahead and close this inspection if I wanted to. So to close this off, all I would have to do is toggle the status from in progress to closed. And as soon as I save that, I'm going to get another pop-up window on my screen. And this is going to deal with, rather than dealing with inspection information, now we're looking back at the property record, and it is automatically rolling your inspection information forward for the purposes of scheduling your periodic inspection. So it's going to say, okay, here was the last inspection date. I want to say that this property needs an inspection every 12 months. It will give me a next inspection date. And if I hit continue here, when I go in and look at the individual property, I will now see that I have my inspection date updated, my periodic inspection set, and a new inspection due date rolled forward. And I can see that I have my closed inspection set on here with information related to the inspection all there together in one place. And now that I've closed this inspection, it pops off my list of current active inspections. Now, that's kind of a best case scenario from your perspective. In a more real life scenario, we might have to do a little bit more work there. So if I am working on a property and I go in and create an inspection on here, and let's say that in this scenario, I have done a routine inspection, but I actually have to fill out one of my actual inspection reports. So, for example, if I select a checklist here, then the software will populate this checklist with the preset checklist template that's attached to this property. These are, once you build a template once on a property, it stays consistent for all inspections going forward so that you get a standard checklist form. So if I select a checklist, it's going to pop me up with a full inspection checklist. So this is going to give me information about, again, recipients, who gets copies of this thing. And in this scenario, what it's also actually going to show me is for this particular property, the previous inspection that was done had some unsatisfactory notes. So in this case, I can actually see those brought forward. Whether you want this stuff brought forward like this is a configuration setting in FirePro, but it is an option for inspection reports and for checklists. But normally I could go through this entire process and say, okay, let's just maximize the size. These things are satisfactory. This thing is unsatisfactory. And I can, if it is unsatisfactory, use both the list and code buttons to put in some text related to why it is unsatisfactory. So if I use the list, this is actually a customizable list that you can build yourself in the system, which lets you go in and attach individual pre-built text to this list items. You can have as many list items as you want. You can also use the code button. This will allow you to pull up any onboard imported FirePro, in this case, fire or building codes. You can custom build some of these. This is what this department has done. They've custom built a couple of specific code regulations. Like they haven't gone to the trouble of putting the entire electrical code in, but if they have a few items from the electrical code or the gas regulations that they want, in this case though, there's also the building code or the provincial fire code. So you can just flip through that section that you want, double click on the item, and add that text directly to this particular contravention. This works the same when you're doing contraventions and checklists. The list and code buttons more or less work exactly the same. What I can also do in here is I can attach a picture if I want to. I can just browse for the photograph, go to my pictures, and drop a picture in there. And this is going to allow me to have a specific picture that's attached in there. Now, this department also has an automation configuration built into it, but I'll show you how to do this manually, where if they build a inspection report or checklist on an inspection, it automatically sets what we call a reinspection date. So I'm going to say we're going to update that. And in this case, we have an issue date. So the system is prompting if you would like to email the inspection to all recipients. If I hit yes here, then it's going to actually automatically bring up several different forms in the system. Those can include the body of a text. It's got the inspection checklist attached in here, and the recipients, because they have email addresses, are attached in automatically. again, we can help you configure your FirePro to do this kind of stuff if you're interested. You can also build what we call templates, where the templates have a standard set of recipients and additional text that might show up in here to make this process a little faster and easier. I'm not going to send this inspection. I think the owner would find it confusing, but it can send those inspections off. And in this case, it actually created 2 separate emails, one for each recipient. And the reason that we see that is that we actually have 2 recipients flagged on this inspection. So if I go in and print this inspection off, I will get some options as far as what I want to print on that finalized report. But when I actually go in and print it, it's going to give me one, which shows the one that's sent to Christina Smith, which is, again, the whole checklist in this configuration, and one that is sent to the restaurant. So we're getting 2 separate copies of the form, one for each recipient that's attached as a contact in. So this process more or less works the same way throughout all the different types of FirePro inspections where I can flag who my recipients are. Now, once I've got this sent out and issued, in this case, the process was somewhat automated, but you can also do this manually. There is a reinspection scheduled field on the main property. This is indicating when am I scheduled to follow up on this inspection or to do a reinspection on it. So this reinspection schedule, this will appear when I'm looking at my inspections on here. I can see I've got a reinspection date scheduled for a particular inspection. Likewise, I can see that potentially this one was not assigned to Steve is the problem. I can see I've got my one for January 10th in here. What I can also do is that the software will generate reminders for me on those re-inspections as well. So I can actually look in my reminder set and say, show me my re-inspection reminders. I think it is inspection follow-up. And again, I can flag that inspection follow-up and I can tie it to the specific inspections that are assigned to me if I want to. Now, this follow-up's not until January of next year, so it won't show up in here automatically. But if I look for, say, next year's re-inspections, I might potentially, or this year altogether, I might start to see the other inspections in there. So the re-inspection reminders are going to give you notifications that these inspections are due to follow up on once an inspection has been created. And those are separate from the scheduled periodic inspection reminders on the system. So let's assume now in this context that I have gone ahead and gone back to do a follow-up. So if I do a follow-up on this inspection, I have a couple different ways that I can document that, depending on what kind of paperwork you want to be providing to the recipient of the inspection. One option would be that you could then create a compliance report. So if I say I'm going to create a compliance report, I'm going to attach it to the inspection checklist that I already generated and say that everything is satisfactory now. Once I print that, I can go ahead and print this out and I can include checklist items on it if I want to. So it's in fact going to show me some of my issues that I might have populated in the previous inspection. So again, in this case, I have multiple recipients, so it's giving me 2 different copies of this compliance report. Alternatively, I might not want to do a compliance report. I might want to do another inspection checklist. So if I generate another checklist on this inspection history, then it's going to pop up all the information from the previous inspection, in this case, the inspection checklist, but that would also include an inspection report, which is more of a contravention corrective action format, will get flowed forward to this new inspection checklist. The main thing that we see that's a little bit different on a secondary inspection report on a property is that we now have a tick box here called resolved. So resolved is intended to be used to quickly document when a particular contravention has been resolved and when, based on the issue date. or the date of the follow-up inspection. So you could go through, tick off resolved on your various different items, and then email that inspection out to your various different recipients. So in those scenarios, I can quickly say, okay, now we have, in this case, I want to include all checklist pictures, all items, and I want to show all items on here. So I can print out something like this, which again is going to now include the pictures that I added, all my different checklist items, the whole thing on them. So depending on exactly what kind of layout you want on these finalized inspections, you have a fair bit of flexibility when you print it. But in this case, again, I have multiple different recipients, so it's going to print me multiple copies of this inspection. So in that scenario, I might have sent this inspection checklist out, which shows that everything is resolved, and I could now go ahead and close this inspection process. You may end up having to do multiple inspection checklists on them. Now, in the context of the province of Ontario, things work just a little bit differently, so I want to quickly go over that process as well. So if we just switch to a different system. Should I have an Ontario? Actually, let's just do this. So if I'm working in a province that has the inspection orders, in this case, that is Ontario primarily, although we do have the Alberta inspection order available for Fire Pro right now if you want, your process tends to be just a touch different. So the first thing that you'll notice in Ontario is that you have quite a few more potential inspection forms in here. So the Order Clause A to G is the older version of the inspection order. The Order 2020 is the current provincial version of the inspection order, and it's the one we would recommend for any new inspections that you might be doing. There's also an order to close, the immediate threat to life order, and an electrical inspection order, which are available. You do also have the compliance report option, similar to any other province. So if we do something like an Order 2020, the way that these orders work is a little bit different from a more standard inspection report. So in this case, we can see we have a bit more information here relating to township, the clause of the FPPA that the order is being issued under, who the order was issued to specifically, which officer issued the order as opposed to maybe did the inspection itself, how the order was issued, and we can have a complete by date assigned to it. So the complete by date for an inspection order works pretty much the same way as that re-inspection date works. It's just that each individual order can have its own complete by date. And we do this because there are scenarios where inspectors will issue multiple orders on the same property as part of the same inspection process. That's less of an issue with the new format, but it's definitely something that we see happen out there. So once you're building an order, you're going to have some reasons for the order. The reasons work almost exactly the same way as the checklists or the inspection reports. You can put in fire code reference if you want to do that. You have the integrated fire code. You can put in then the reasons and the actions required. Again, these have options for lists that you might want to add in there. You can also identify who the order was served to. If it's served to individual people, you can do that. You can also serve it to the entire occupants of a building. That is mostly when you're dealing with a large multi-unit property, and you're just going to serve it by posting it publicly. There is also the ability to select specific recipients on there. So, this is going to allow you to generate, I have to have at least one reason. Why and what? And you can have multiple reasons for each order if you want to. This is also where the description of property would appear, but this is going to allow you to print out the inspection order. And this order is a very standardized form, right? It's going to have your department logo and the number, but otherwise standardized form throughout. It includes the compliance information, right to request review. It's the entire provincial form on it. So this is a slightly different template for inspections. What also happens with the inspection orders specifically is that they're not really designed for you to do re-inspections the same way you might on a checklist or an inspection report. Usually with an inspection order, if the order is not complied with, what you're going to be doing rather than doing a follow-up order is doing a reissue of the order. So from an individual inspection order file, you can actually go into the order and select the option called reissue order here, which is going to let you essentially create an exact copy of the previous order, potentially with new dates, with different information on it, potentially with different reasons. But the idea would be that you can reissue the order so that you've got multiple orders issued. Now, all this kind of stuff, when you have multiple orders issued, each order can have its own complete by date, and those complete by dates will also generate reminders for you specifically in the reminders module. So we can see that if we go into the reminders here, I can have an inspection order follow-ups, and that is actually going to give me specific dates for when inspection orders need to be followed up on. So you can have multiple different specific follow-up dates for multiple orders attached to the same inspection that's ongoing if you want to do that. But otherwise, they largely work the same way in the context of you can go in, close these, you can issue compliance reports on them if people are in compliance now. So in this case, I could say I want to issue a compliance report that's attached to that secondary inspection order that I issued and say now things are satisfactory. So that is also an option for things you can do. We do also have our more generic inspection report and notice of violation. For those of you in Ontario, this more or less aligns with the old Ontario inspection report, but broadly an inspection report is designed to be a contravention corrective action format, where you have a contravention of the provincial fire code, in this case the Ontario, but it can be any fire code that you want. That's going to bring in text. You might have what is the code object or the functional objective that you want to work with here, and maybe the inspector's comments, or in some configurations, the corrective action that's required. Again, each one of these contraventions can have a picture attached to them if you want to be using photographs. So you can attach pictures directly to those individual items. And those are going to allow you to print out a detailed list. Again, we've got recipients, works pretty much the same way. These reports also, let's go with 12 for my report. These reports also are going to print out as a detailed report. They look a little bit different in terms of just their standard layout. This boilerplate, all customizable. We can assist you with that. These headers, all customizable. So the other thing here that you want to think about is as you start to generate more and more inspections and activities, you might want to be running some reports against these. And I know we've gone long on time, but I'm going to quickly go through the reports and then we can wrap this up. But one of the things that I can do is if I look on the inspection list, I could say, show me any inspections that have happened this year. I'm not going to necessarily look at inspector or status. I just want to see a full list of everything that's happened. And then I could start to generate a variety of reports on those inspections. So I could do a graph, I could do maps of where the inspections have happened, or I could do something like a summary report or summary by inspector. Summary by inspector is nice because what it'll do is it'll break down how many inspections that person's done, how many reports they've been done, and how many reports have been issued on there. Gives you a breakdown based on the current status of those inspections. You can also do reports which will do things like reason and occupancy type breakdowns, showing how many inspections are done for each reason, for each occupancy type. these are just intended to give you statistical overviews of what kind of activities are actually happening in inspections. In some cases, you might want to go into a little more detail. The events tab does have a few reports in there that lets you go into even more detail, where I can say, show me everything that's happened this year and give me a detailed breakdown of that by inspector. So it's going to go in and show, here's how many totals we've had, inspections, events by each inspector. Alternatively, I could do something like an unresolved contravention summary, which is going to give me actually a breakdown of the different types of contraventions that have gone unresolved in this time period, showing me specific contravention stuff. I can even go in and say, give me summaries of the Order 2020s, which is just going to give me a more detailed breakdown based on the results of inspection orders. This one's a bit big, so yeah, we can see here's a summary of all the orders that I issued, how many I issued under each property, and this gives me actual breakdowns based on fire code reference numbers. So some interesting potential reports. In addition to that, you can actually search based on contravention reference number if you want to do that. So if you're looking for show me all my 1.1.1, I probably didn't have one that what matches in there, but you can search for specific contraventions if you want. So there's a lot of different varieties of searches that you can do and reports that you can run on top of the process of actually doing inspections. Now, we have gone pretty long, so I think I'm going to check and see if there's any questions at this point, and then wrap it up from there. Always bear in mind that if you want a more detailed rundown, you want to do some configuration for your specific department, just book some time with us through technical support, and we can do a bit of an audit of what you're doing, make sure it's configured the way you need it to be. There's a lot of capability in this inspections module, so we're more than happy to help you untap. So if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, put that in the chat. We'll get that wrapped up.